Well, good evening and welcome to Pull Up a Chair. In the past, these Pull Up a Chair discussions have focused on race matters, but we thought that it was important to shift the discussion tonight to address mental health, to openly talk about our emotional and our spiritual health. For many of us, the last 12 months have been hard, really hard. We've all been affected by the pandemic. Additionally, some of us have felt the weight of financial struggles, of working from home full-time, of taking on more responsibility of our kids and their education, as well as just helping them navigate these uncertain times. We may be dealing with COVID ourselves, or the loss of loved ones, or other illnesses, lost jobs, lost businesses, delayed celebrations. We may have family and friends that are essential workers. We may be isolated from loved ones. Perhaps we're experiencing fear or anger or concern over the racial and political climate of our country and the world. We might feel sad, alone, anxious, afraid, worried, depressed. I think overall, many of us are grieving our old life. So tonight, we're going to talk about this, and I hope that it will be an encouragement for you. For me, the questions have been things like, how do we care for ourselves and others in these uncertain times? How do we, especially those of us who call ourselves Christ followers, acknowledge and face the condition of our souls in the midst of all of this? How do we look at, face, and invite Jesus into this? This evening, we welcome Holly Carlson, Ginny Murray Shotwell, and Scott Schaefer to have real conversation about topics that need to be talked about out loud as a church family, and as a community that is committed to helping each other. So first, I just want to have each of you introduce yourselves. Holly?
Hello, I'm Holly. I'm here today because I have a background. I'm a psychiatric mental health nurse, and so I have a background working in patient county psych in psychiatric hospitals. I did psychiatric crisis in the ER. I took a break from psych nursing for a while and worked as a home health nurse, taking care of homebound patients in their home. And currently I am caring for nurses who are home health nurses. And that's what I've been doing for the last 6 months. So.
Thanks, Holly. What about you, Ginny?
Ginny, I am a licensed clinical social worker. So I was in private practice for over 25 years in El Dorado Hills, Cameron Park, Placerville. And now I do crisis work and I'm retired from my private practice. And then I do crisis work where they say, you know, a school shooting has happened and counselors have been called in. And so that's what I do now, which is not as much during COVID because nobody is in schools or in businesses and stuff. So that's what I do. I used to be a part of Oak Hills years ago, but now I live in Amador County, which is not that far. So, but for many, many years was a part of Oak Hills.
Great. What about you, Scott?
I'm Scott. I've been at Oak Hills for, I think, about 8 years. So this is my family. I'm currently on the elder board, and I currently am part of the leadership team for our weekly prayer gathering that we do on Wednesday nights. And it's good to be here. And my day job, I'm a consultant in the IT industry. So
awesome. Okay, well, we're going to hop right into it, and I'm going to start with Holly. Holly, when I had originally talked to you about doing Pull Up the Chair, one of the things that you said to me was you talked about the gift of the pandemic. And I've been intrigued by that and have thought about it a lot. So I'm hoping that you can explain to all of us what you meant by that.
Yeah, so I think I meant a lot of things, and, you know, not to, you know, the pandemic has been horrendous and hard, and people have died, and we've been alone and isolated. And so I don't want to take away from that. But one of the things that I've noticed and that has been part of my life is just this recognition that I can't do it on my own. There is this sense that the pandemic, I think we have in our culture, we've created this false sense of independence, and I don't need other people. So the people I have in my life are there because I want them, because whatever the reason is. But for many of us, we actually haven't been able to function on our own during this time. And so we needed help. For parents who are also working, we needed someone to teach our kids, or to, like, save our kids from us. And, some of us, we couldn't get toilet paper for a while, and we needed help with that. Or there's just too much to do with working and being a parent, and so you need someone to help with your groceries, but it's not just as easy as someone going to the grocery store. And so that's been this huge blessing, is just the learning part. But I think also there's just these gifts that happen when there is sorrow and loss around us. There's this way that God meets us there, and calls us to him. And I think he's always doing that. It's just a lot easier to hear when the messiness of life isn't there. And so just being all the junk stripped away, all the busyness stripped away, and we actually get to hear God, because all the things that we've done to drown out our pain or discomfort are gone. So I'm left with, like, me and God and my family, some of which I don't even like, like God, me, my family. And so I have to walk into that, and there's nothing to keep me from facing that. And then I think also there's this empathy, this opportunity for empathy, because, like I've told you before, for a lot of people, the pandemic didn't actually change that much. There's this huge population of people who struggle to be able to do things like go to the grocery store, or, leave their home. And I think this gives us an opportunity to see what it's like when we lose those opportunities.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, I think that it also, when I've been thinking about what you meant, in addition to what you said, another gift is that we have found out that we're dependent on each other. And this is a good thing in a society that we don't really want to be dependent on each other. So it really is a place of vulnerability and having to be honest with ourselves that we need other people. And the challenge, of course, is how to do that when we're isolated. We just have to be a little bit wiser on what community can look like when we can't see each other's whole faces or touch each other.
But I also think that this has been an incredibly difficult year for lots and lots and lots of people. And so for a lot of mental health related things have been bubbled up. You got this umbrella of COVID in this blanket kind of, and then you've got this bubbling up of things from the past, maybe, or, things you couldn't cope with this. And so it's been a really difficult year for a lot of people. Alcoholism is up, drug abuse is up. I mean, suicide's up. It's been hard.
So Jenny, that brings me to a question for you. I mean, the numbers, like you say, are frightening in terms of suicide and depression and all of that. What's your observation in terms of adults and teens and kids? And how do we assess our loved ones and know if they're doing okay, and this is just, a couple of bad days in a row, or there's something really that we should be concerned about?
Well, what I've seen a lot of is anxiety. So, there's a lot of depression as well. So anxiety and depression, and sometimes they kind of walk two in a row. They're like fraternal twins. But some of the symptoms of the anxiety that I've seen are, let me see if I can find that. It's just so uncertain, and then people have had racing thoughts. And I can even say that for myself. I don't like uncertainty. I don't like, well, what's going to happen tomorrow? Well, what's going to happen? Am I going to get sick? Am somebody else going to get sick? What is, can I go to Costco? Can I not go to Costco? Should I double mask? Should I single mask? There have been so many really, really confusing things that have led to anxiety. And some of the things with anxiety are like racing thoughts, worrying, overthinking things. I'm really good at this. You get these intrusive thoughts that just come out of nowhere. And you think, I wasn't even thinking about that, but they just kind of like gallop in. Agitation, restlessness, fatigue. You just feel dull, or some people do. And then you got hypervigilance. So you're looking for everything, and panic attacks, lots of uncertainty, lots of loss, lots of grief, feeling out of control. And even where, there's this thing called disassociation, where, I used to know I'd be driving home from El Dorado Hills, and I'd get to a certain part of Latrobe and say, I don't even remember driving on that windy road. Mm-hmm. And so that happens with some people now too, where they just kind of click off as a protection. Their brains do that. So that's the anxiety spectrum.
So
go ahead, Scott.
Go ahead, Scott. So how many signs should I have? How many of those signs should I have before I need to seek a therapist or something? Or how many signs should I see in my kids? I mean, I'd be afraid, let's say, to plant anything inside of my kid that I'm worried about them. But what would you say to the parent who's going, how do I navigate? How do I tell them about the pandemic? But don't panic, but I'm panicking inside. What would be your advice to those parents of smaller kids and teens, frankly?
Well, so let's stick with the smaller kids, because, they have to have a routine. They have to have, my daughter calls it the bad cold, so she didn't want to scare her kids, but she wanted them to know that it was a serious thing. And we don't want to get the bad cold. And Gigi doesn't want to get the bad cold, or, Papa, any of their older people, but to try not to frighten them, because kids pick up in everything, kids know when we're nervous. And so that's actually quite troubling when the mom or the dad or whatever parent is really stressed. The kid's going to pick it up. They know everything. And so, as a therapist seeing little kids, I would just ask them, so how you doing with this? What's going on? I mean, and then I would describe. Little kids get stomach aches. And so that's one of the things. Okay, well, what are we thinking about? What are you thinking about? I mean, you can end up in some kind of prayer, but you want them to start to talk about what they're worried about. And yeah, they saw this on TV, or this kid was talking about that. Well, tell me about that. So, it might be really good for you to have some feeling words where you could say, so are you worried about that? So is that, so what, I mean, I like the Columbo technique, where I don't know if very many people remember Columbo, but he had this kind of naive way of bringing in stuff. It's like, well, and you knew he was really smart and he knew what was going on, but he had some really kind of naive, open questions. And those are really good with little kids, because there are a lot of little kids right now that are nervous and they're sad. And that's just one feeling word in all that
Sure.
realm. There's
Sure.
actually, you can download lists of feeling words and print them out. And that's actually really helpful.
Is that something that they can point to how they're feeling?
They can
I see.
read them. And some of the lists have anxiety words and depression words. And so it's like, have you ever felt this? Wow, really? You felt that?
Right.
Me too. So you
And
don't, go ahead.
I think kids so often don't know how they feel,
Right.
or don't know that they're feeling sometimes. And that's what you said, the stomach ache, or
Right.
the acting out, the anger, the frustration, the lack of patience. So I think those are all things to watch out for. And, sometimes kids will just say things, like, I'm not happy. I've never been happy, or little things like that, which you're sitting there and you're like, that's not true.
Right.
But recognizing that this is how they're interpreting it. And then I think, when, as far as seeking professional help, I don't even know when that would be, because it's going to be so different for different kids. And I think obviously, if your kid or a young adult is making comments about wanting to hurt themselves, things like that, that actually, can happen. And so anything like that, you'd instantly want to find some help. And it's okay to ask if they're making comments around it. It's okay to ask directly. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Things like that. I think it's really important, if you have that gut feeling, you can ask that. But Jenny, do you have any other ideas of, like, what are some good signals of, I need someone, I can't, as a parent, I can't do this, I need help? What other indicators be?
Well, if your kid is talking to you, if your kid is, before bed at night, if they're spilling it, then that's just really good. I mean, all a therapist does is get a kid to talk, and they, name their feelings, talk, how to work through them, how to breathe, how to do all those kind of things. So, but if it's up a level higher, then call somebody. I think, a lot of people have health insurance, and there would be people on their health insurance panel that would be therapists. I mean, therapists are really busy right now, because everybody that had that therapist in the past wants to come back, because it's been such a difficult year. But so that's not.
One of the things that I've noticed is that, last March, maybe, my prayer life was that the pandemic would go away. Now I'm in a different space. I'm in a place of, God, I hope it goes away. But in the meantime, what is it that you would like me to learn about myself and about people? That could be patience, that could be trust, that could be all kinds of things. Scott, it seems to me that there's a direct relationship between our mental health and our spiritual health. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I think about prayer, individual prayer, your own practice and your own conversations with God, there's a lot of things that go on, but two fundamental things are, one is we just ask for our own needs, right? We bring our needs to God. Peter says in his first book, cast all your cares upon the Lord because he cares for you. And the point is a direct command. It's not just encouragement, it's a command. God wants to know what's going on, and he doesn't want the right answer. He's not looking for you to clean it up and get it together. It's like, if you care about it, no matter whether it's founded or not, he cares about it. So that's pretty fundamental. He promises to give us everything that we need. So if I think about Psalm 23, which we're all pretty familiar with, just the first few verses of Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. I lack nothing. That's not the psalmist making an aspirational statement thinking, I'm going to get my act together and get to this place spiritually where I lack nothing. No, he's describing a reality that's determined by God, we're going to lack nothing. So to take our concerns to God is simply to reorient towards reality, towards God, the ultimate reality, which is God. And he says, I'm going to take care of you. I want to know what's going on. I want you to ask, seek, knock. It's to realize it's a reset in the midst of all the noise and fear, which are real. It's not like I got to get away from this noise and fear. They're real. In the midst of the noise and fear, I need to orient myself towards the rest of reality, which is what God says about me and about his care for me. So I think so that the two big things in individual prayer are, it is to ask God for what you need, and then to get reoriented to who he is and what he's going to do and what he's promised you. So
I think there's some really beautiful parallels between spiritual health and mental health, in that, for example, you can be in a dark place spiritually and still do things, still maintain a relationship with God. You can still do healthy things for your spiritual health. And that's the same thing with mental health. For people who have true mental health disorders, whether it's temporary or long-term, you can be in a very poor mental health state and still have coping skills that keep you from getting worse, or at least keep you somewhat stable through all of this. And I think that's just this really beautiful thing to remember is you can be not okay, and there are still things you can do to maintain that health, spiritual, emotional, mental. And so I think that's just a really beautiful thing to remember is my spiritual health, my mental health is I have some say in how I'm coping with that, and ways that I can do that, because sometimes when you're in these dark places, spiritually, mentally, whatever, it feels like it's my fault. It feels like I'm doing something wrong. But frequently you can be doing all the right things and still be in poor health, or be doing everything wrong and having a rich experience, because sometimes it's just the way the body works, or it's what God's at work doing. And so recognizing that there's a connection between what I do and how I am, but that connection is not always consistent and perfect. Healthy habits can feed health, but they don't guarantee it. I think is really important to remember.
Well, and especially if you've got like bipolar, or, there's stuff that is sicker than just some anxiety.
Yeah.
And so that some DNA is involved in that, and some lifestyle, but, bipolar, schizophrenia, all that is, it's hard to have, to pray and have that go away.
Yeah.
I think one thing that has helped me during these last 12 months is just admitting at times that I'm not okay.
Yeah.
Because it feels like once I admit that, now I'm in a place where I can be built back up. And I think that us living in the suburbs, we have a built-in, I'm okay, I'm self-sufficient, I'm doing all right. And even within the church, we can still say we're okay when maybe we're not, because we're managing our image. But I think that there is strength in admitting that you're not okay, of just claiming it in your prayers and to other people. And and that can help in our prayer life as well, right, Scott?
Yeah, and what occurs to me is that in almost any challenge, the path is not to be pulled out of it, but to be guided through it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and the one thing your enemy would love to convince you of is, you're not okay, so don't take that to God. Don't let anybody see that. That it serves his purposes of deceiving you, because whatever's not okay, that's where you are. That's where God is living you right now. That's where God is trying to work. And whatever's going on, but small problem or large, the path is going to be through it with him. So you just can't start stepping along that path until you say, hey, I'm just not okay. So, but the beautiful thing too is, as you share that with the body, it doesn't take very long before you start to realize, hey, there's people around me that actually care, and they're not freaked out by this. They're not looking down at me about this. They actually want to go to bat for me spiritually or physically or emotionally or whatever it is. It's just like, you know, hey, I'm not alone in this, and it's okay to not be okay. So
Both, I think
Most
I've had
of us
comments.
Most
Oh,
of us
sorry,
are,
go ahead, Ginny.
well, most of us are not okay. I mean, that's just authentic. I mean, you know, or some days we're okay and some days we're not, or some hours we are and some hours we're not. And, you know, just to know yourself well enough to know, you know, what set me off this time? What did I think? What, you know, did I eat the wrong thing, or am I around the wrong person? So, you know, I mean, we're not okay a lot of the time, and we haven't been okay in the past year a lot of the time.
And that's I think the struggle so much this last year specifically, because as a body, as a community, we all go through these phases where we're not okay, and we reach out to each other. And not only have we been inhibited from reaching out to each other or receiving help from each other, but everyone else is struggling too. You know, usually different people are struggling. No, we're all struggling. And so as a community, finding ways to bring about health is really important, because right now we're all kind of drowning. So how do we find a way to swim through this together is going to be necessary, because this isn't over. You know, we still got some time, and there's still a lot of struggles ahead of us.
I actually think, Holly, that that's one of those gifts of the pandemic, is that we have got to reframe community. And I definitely feel like, you know, in some sense, you know, we're being stripped away, but if we're paying attention, this is a beautiful space to kind of see where we need work.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where God takes us as we come out, you know, as COVID releases its grip a little bit, because one of the gifts is it's been said a couple of ways already, the realization of how much we need each other, the realization of the things that may not be right in our own lives. This has been a circumstance where you can't ignore that. I thought I had a deep appreciation for our church family and for the body, but it's so much clearer now. It's so much clearer now. And I know I'm not alone in that experience. So to see, okay, how is this going to make us healthier as a body? I'm excited to see that. And we'll be seeing that, you know, a year from now. I think we'll know a lot of things we don't know, and a lot of it will be pretty glorious. So
absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about coping. So we acknowledge that we're sad or mad or depressed or stressed. So, you know,
Or
how do we cope?
Or angry.
Or angry. Angry, frustrated.
Right.
Ready for this to be over. All of those kinds of things. But let's talk a little bit about, how do we cope?
So can I talk? So
please.
First of all, I think we need to identify that we're not okay. And that we need better coping skills. And because this is hard. And so, you know, I immediately I know I have to eat right. I have to take my vitamin D. I have to be outside in the sunlight. These are all coping skills for me. So actually, when there was the smoke, when we were all encased in smoke, that was probably the lowest part for me, because I couldn't go outside. I couldn't dig in my garden. I couldn't walk with the dog. I couldn't do all those things that are, you know, that are so important to me. I think some people have melted down a little bit where they're drinking too much. They're talking too much about things. And those are not really good coping skills. They're just obsessing and talking about things. A routine is really important for all of us, that you get up and you actually, you know, eat breakfast, you eat something with protein in it, you brush your teeth, you get dressed.
Yeah.
You know, even if you don't have to go anywhere, just put on a pair of jeans and get dressed. Put on a little makeup, because that always, you know.
Does yoga pants count? Just
yoga pants count, because yoga pants are fine.
Only if you'd wear them out.
And do yoga.
And do yoga. And yoga is really good, I think, because it's a centering practice and you have to learn how to breathe. So that's a good coping skill. Socialize in positive ways, reach out, call people. I mean, I know somebody and she just calls somebody every day that she knows is hurting worse than she is. And, but so exercise, all those things that, your mother might've told you or whatever, and you've read in different articles, they're true. They're true. Avoid bad things, toxic things to you, but practice good things for your body, mind, and soul. You guys?
Because just like the mental health is tied to the spiritual health, I think that's also tied to the physical. I mean, I know that's also tied to the physical health.
It is.
And so taking little steps of health, integrating healthy coping skills in any of those spheres will affect the other spheres, and everything is linked. And so really having some very, very like a tool chest, a toolbox of things that and if you're struggling with anxiety, I think it's actually really important to write those down and have a couple things that that you can go to all the time. For example, like there's some different apps out there that you can use, like the Calm app, things like that are really useful. I use Lectio 365. It's one of my favorite apps that I start my every day off with this, most days off with this time of prayer, guided by the app. Ginny, you talked about just breathing, and I think that's really important. There are ways to breathe that are very healthy and cleansing, and actually they affect your heart rate. They can slow down your brain. They actually interrupt some of that cyclical spinning. Mm-hmm. And so identifying those ones that work for you, or that your spouse or your kids say work for you, because you won't always know because it's working well. So you might not notice this, but other people will know, hey, you do a lot better when you do that. You're nicer to me when you go for a walk. Listen to the people around you, listen to your soul, and find those things. And then especially if you're struggling with anxiety, I would write those down, have them on a note on your phone so that you don't have to think, you don't have to make a decision. You say, when I feel this, I do this. Really, really helpful tools.
Yeah. I also, I've had some training in this thing called EMDR, which is a bilateral stimulation. So that helps people with trauma. And so I know that right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left is really important to me. And it's calming to my brain. And so that's why walking or swimming or any of those things are really good for me, because I use the right half of my body and then the left half of my body, right half and the left half. And so I can even sit in my car in my steering wheel and go like this and tap on the steering wheel if I'm feeling nervous about something. So as long as you do a bilateral stimulation, or I go like this, right there where, where somebody would wear a tie, I can tap on that, and it actually can, I can do it right now. And I almost feel it in my toes. It's very calming to me. So you just figure out what those things are for you.
Everybody on the call, we can't do that because people can see us, but everybody else at home is doing this right now.
I want to, and I'm going to when this is over.
Yeah. One practice that I discovered, a friend of mine who's a coach actually got this from his coach. It's a practice of in the morning, every 10 minutes, spend 10 minutes writing. It is not journaling. Yeah. It is not praying. And I'm a person, I wake up, because I wake up kind of slowly, I wake up full of thoughts, most of them negative. So when I go to work, first thing I do, I've set a timer, 10 minutes of writing. It's not narrative. It's not structured. You just barf it out. It's amazing how that clears the day. It doesn't solve anything. It just seems to put a ton of those naggy things that are going on. It just calms them all down. And I've found that kind of a breakthrough practice. Where for me, journaling has never worked really well. I've just never had a good practice of journaling. So
I agree. I agree that we just have to find a couple of coping mechanisms that will work for us. One of the things that you said, Ginny, was about that I thought about is taking the focus off of me.
Yeah.
And I mean, what would it look like, honestly, if each of us, plus all the participants that are watching this evening, went through their phones and just called the people that have at least made it into their contact list and just text them and just said, I'm thinking about you.
Yeah.
I mean, what that is community happening,
Yeah.
via satellite, I mean, what would that mean? If they were important enough to be in your phone, then text them and see how they're doing. And don't be okay with when they send you a happy face emoji, like follow up, and ask, no, really, how are you doing? I've gotten to the habit of asking people, no, really, how are you doing?
Yeah, you do.
And
Right.
that and actually like looking in their face. And that has been a good practice because we're just trained to go, I'm good, I'm fine. I'm good. I don't need anything. No, I'm good. I'm good. When we're really breaking up inside. And for those of us who have, particularly who have kids, we're trying to hold it together for ourselves so that we don't show our kids our weakness. But it sounds like, Jenny, it's okay to say, yeah, I'm struggling too, to your kids without.
Because they know.
They know that's just the
Yeah.
Well, and that might, I think also learning coping skills that you can do with your kids or that you can teach your kids is also really important. And those aren't actually that different than what we do for ourselves. I mean, maybe use a crayon instead of a pen, but, kids can learn, Torrin's my daughter, we've done deep breathing since she was like 3. And just doing practices of deep breathing and when I'm irritated, she will sometimes remind me to do those. But having those tools that you can do with your kid or teach your child is really important. And I think it's pretty much the same skills that we do for ourselves.
Several years ago, everybody was doing we had the adult coloring books. I have at least 3 of them myself. And this is a good time to maybe break those out because they give your hand something to do while your brain can hopefully slow down. Obviously, Scott, it just seems like, yeah, well, pray. That's the way to get through all of your stress. Pray. What would you say to that when people say, well, I don't know what to pray? God knows. That's such an easy thing. God knows what I'm feeling. What do you, how do you respond to that?
I would say, yes, you should pray, and you should develop some prayer practices that are effective. Now, I don't want, prayer is not mechanical. Prayer is a conversation with God, but there's things you can do that just make it's not talking God into talking to you, but it's orienting yourself in such a way that you can more clearly speak to him and you can hear from him. I think, did one of you guys mention breath prayer, or was that in our pre-conversation?
I think it was
yeah.
Yeah. So does somebody want to explain, because to train people on breath prayer takes 15 seconds. Does anybody want to do it, or I'll do it?
Do it.
Okay. So a breath prayer is simply, you breathe in saying something to God and you breathe out saying something to God. So I mentioned Psalm 23. My breath prayer could be, I breathe in and I say, breathing in, I say or think, the Lord is my shepherd. And as I exhale, I say, I lack nothing. And there's thousands of them. There's many scriptures that are couplets. You can use those.
Scott, I would strongly encourage the actual saying of it. I know the thinking sometimes is a good first step, but something happens when you vocalize that.
Yeah, and especially as you exhale, vocalize it. Sometimes I can't quite, I can't get it right coming in, but absolutely, it's an embodied thing. You don't want to just be thinking about it. You want to be speaking it. Language has power. So, but just to do that, and now that I'm on the hook, I can't think of any right off the top of my head, but I have a whole list that I look at, usually from whatever I'm doing in scripture. I'll pick one out, but there's a whole list I look at, and it's extremely effective. Extremely effective.
Well, it ends up then, hopefully you can get to some point where with gratitude. So it's like, thank you.
Right.
So you're reframing and refocusing some of that stuff that's going on in your head to say, you know what? The Lord is my shepherd.
Right. And this is a great example. So yeah, I can say, hey, I will lack nothing. That's a great intellectual statement, right? But if I am doing a breathing exercise, I'm quiet, I'm speaking to God, and I'm saying multiple times, I will lack nothing. My heart starts to think about, what does it mean to lack nothing? My heart starts to think about, this is actually true. Am I living? Can I really believe this? My head knows it's true. Can my body and my soul start to believe it's true? And that happens pretty quickly. It's not like I do breath prayer for 30 minutes, right? To me, it's a setup to other things I do in prayer. But it's very effective, because it is a breathing exercise. It just helps recenter you in the midst of all this stuff going on.
Yeah, and I think there's actually a lot of research behind the things like that show it brings those three together: the spiritual, physical, and mental health. And you can actually have neurological changes when you're doing things like gratitude and breath prayers, because it's improving your mental health. It's changing your brain to think differently, reframing, and then you're able to set aside some of those barriers so that you can enter into conversation with God, and finding those things where you can meet God and where God, you can hear God, I think is really important. Again, not just for your relationship with God, but also just your health in general. All these things intersect. And so we got to find those for ourselves and for our children and for our family members, because some people really struggle to figure these out on their own. But finding these practices.
There's two opportunities I hope to give a commercial for tonight. And one involves individual prayer. We usually do a solitude and silence retreat once a year at Oak Hills. Now, when I first heard it, solitude and silence retreat, great. I'm going to learn how to be quiet and how to be alone. That's going to be a good weekend. That's not what it was at all. It is so active and so proactive and so engaging. So it's a one-day retreat. We will do it either, as soon as COVID lets go enough, we will schedule it. It's a Saturday thing. We usually do it at Mercy Center up in Auburn, which is a beautiful facility to do that kind of thing. But it's super engaging. And what you will learn are some of these techniques. No rocket science. It's all really straightforward, but you'll learn it and have a chance to practice it, and find out what does it mean to be in solitude with God, just me and God. What does it mean to be silent? What's the difference? It's extremely constructive and fruitful. So I'd encourage you guys to go when you see that scheduled. And I said, I hope it'll be spring or early summer when we can do that.
What's the second thing?
Let me piggyback to what Holly was talking about, the neuroscience, because we've got all these synapses and all these trails in our brain. And the more we think the same thing, I'm not going to make it, I can't do it, I can't do it, it digs that trail deeper and deeper in our brains. And there's a lot of brain science with that. But, part of what we can do is try to heal those things. And so we have to put something else in there, because it can log jam, and we get sicker and sicker the more jammed up our neural pathways are. I don't know if that makes sense at all. Holly, can you help me here?
Yeah, it does. And I think what's so important is that you find something that is true. Because sometimes when I've heard some people explain it, we do something like, I'm okay, or I'm going to be okay. And I think when you're struggling, sometimes it's hard to believe that. So finding things to change that pathway, like God is here, or just something beautiful, a truth that on the inside, and replacing those negative entrenched things, because the problem is those neural pathways, they're there. And so it's like a path that people have everyone walks on. If you try to go off another way, people aren't necessarily going to follow you. They're going to keep going back on the worn down path. And so it takes a lot of work to rebuild those neural pathways, but it does actually work. Eventually the old path will be overgrown and the new path will work. work. And you'll still have some people that will go off on the old path, but you can change this. And that truly affects us in all the spheres of our life when we do those things. So I think that's the identification of those unhealthy trails, and
Right.
then the shifting of those through different spiritual practices, meditative practices, can make a huge difference in our mental health.
Well, and if you start those little trails as a 4-year-old and you're worried,
Yeah.
and then when you're 40, they're just deeper.
Yeah.
So, so as a parent, to be able to help your kids deal with that in the same ways that we're talking about, and your teenagers, because you really want them to have some kind of hope and some kind of gratitude and some kind of different way of thinking. It's called cognitive behavioral therapy. So you just think in a different way, because some of the things we think, yeah, they aren't very good.
Yeah. Scott, what would you say to the person who it's been an incredibly difficult year, aside from the pandemic and aside from being isolated? They've maybe lost a loved one. It just is compounded. And there are people who are at a place in a space where it's like, I just can't, I'm crying out and I don't hear anything from God. I'm empty.
Mhm.
How does one get in a position to actually hear from God?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you posed I'm in a conversation with a person about this. I'm going to assume that it's an engaged conversation. It's not just a one-off. We ran into each other and something big came up. But this is for, whether I've known the person a long time or not, but I've got some, equity in their life and some connection to them. I think the two things I would focus on, and I'm not sure how I would get this across. There's a lot of ways. It would depend on the situation. But the first thing I try to get across is God understands that this is bad. God understands that this is damage. This is not okay. This is real suffering. This is real human damage that you're talking about. He understands that. And as the suffering God, went through it himself. So, but I would be very careful not to just give the right answers, but that's basic reality. Number one is he gets this and he cares about this. And then reality number two would be to share something about that person, God, how God intends to deal with that person, treat that person, care for that person, which is, there's thousands and thousands of, descriptions in scripture about how God is kind to us and loves us and knows what's happening and grieves with us. I would try to take them somewhere into that, both certainly with my words, but it's way more powerful if that includes God's words. Now, if I'm just flipping out scriptures at them, I don't think that's that helpful. But the scripture is the fundamental truth that ultimately that person needs to take on board into their, not their mind, but into their heart. So I would look for ways that we could explore that. A really easy way is to pray over it. So if you, Sharon, if you said, we met at Palladio or something, and I said, hey, how's, your aunt? And it's like, it's a disaster and a train wreck and so sad, right? Then I might say, hey, can I pray with you? And then what I would pray, I might pray, God, we know that you are Sharon's aunt's shepherd, and you've promised that she will lack nothing. We don't see it. We see this damage, God. We see it. I'm thankful you grieve it, but her aunt needs to hear from you. Her aunt needs to know what you're telling us here, that she will lack nothing. It's just taking the conversation into the reality that right? Into God's reality, not just my opinion. But I think that's what I would try to do. If we're talking about just, it's only me. Now, if it was a group of people, like in, Wednesdays, we deal with things like this in our prayer meetings, then it's a different dynamic. But I think that's what I would do.
So it sounds like a lot of this that we've talked about is community. You just said meeting that person where they're at. And I suspect Ginny and Holly that we might need some tips on not things to say and not to say when people are sharing difficult things. I want to, go, oh, it'll be okay. I'll pray for you. Or, these kind of throwaway lines that make me feel a whole lot better. And the other person is left going, wow, I just like filleted myself and you've given me, a verse and said goodbye. So
Right.
what are some things that, that we could do to be better listeners and encouragers to people who are hurting?
I would say work on it. Work on being encouraging. But more than that, just work on listening and feeding back to somebody else. Oh, it sounds like you're worried about your aunt. Oh my gosh, that must be so hard. And then they open up more, and then they open up more. So with empathy and really good listening, that very much encourages community.
Yeah,
But empathy is really huge.
yeah. I think even just the words "I'm here with you" or "I hear you" are really, really helpful to hear when you don't know what to say. Just it sounds like you're struggling, but I think one of the struggles with this pandemic is and I think with community as a whole is we often aren't able to care for the people who we don't see or whose needs we don't see. And with the pandemic, there's this huge group of people who became invisible all of a sudden. And so while we're all circling our wagons and taking care of ourselves, there's all these people who are left outside to the wolves of the pandemic. And so I think, and there's not a ton we can do about that. We live in a culture that values independence. People struggle to ask for help. People struggle to receive help when it's offered. So I think just working, part of knowing ourselves and knowing our health is knowing when we're okay, knowing when we have something to offer. And a lot of us don't have a lot to offer right now. So I think sometimes it's not just about the listening and being with someone, but really trying to hear, are there practical needs? Does this person need me to grab a chicken when I go to the grocery store? Or I made a coloring packet for my kids, so I'm going to drop one off for theirs. They just need someone to bring them a coffee. Are there things that we can do that care? Some of these people are totally isolated. Or then you take people like me and healthcare workers who we actually never stopped like touching and caring for people. We just lost all the people who filled us back up that way. So you have all these healthcare workers who all they're doing is putting out and nothing's coming back. And that's actually really, really challenging. And so they need someone who's comfortable to hug them. Like it's an actual physical need. And there are people who don't have that. And so I think just the number one thing I think is just keep an eye out for the people who have been left out of the community. I think that's really, really important for us as Oak Hills, us as a Christian community, to just listen to the people who look for the people who aren't on our radar. And then just see if there's something we can do. And then for the people who are on their radar, is there something that they need that I can offer? Because a lot of times it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to drive by and stand outside their house and just say hi. And so just think about ways we can integrate others into our lives, especially those who have been who don't have someone else in their home, or who are in homes that don't have supportive people. Just look for those people and see if there's a way you have something to offer. And when you don't, that's okay. I have a friend who is just spiraling out of control and really struggling. And I can tell her, because that's the way a relationship is, I don't have anything to offer, but I'm here to listen. Or sometimes I'm not even available to listen. Can I call you tomorrow? It's totally okay to say, I can't do this now. But yeah, that's what I would say.
That's good. That's good.
Well, and I need to say something about what we put into our brains and the social media and the news sources and all the chatter that's around us, I have a much different day when I'm listening to that chatter in the morning versus when I go outside and feed the birds.
Yes.
So I would turn off as much as you can. If you care about your mental health, turn off social media or limit it to, however many minutes a day. But we are addicted to our phones, and that's not good for our bodies, minds, or souls.
Yeah,
Just a little.
Jenny, I think that's excellent. Our input matters.
Yes.
And even things like turning off notifications on your social media so that
Right.
you're not triggered to look at your phone, something like that. And again, input, especially in the mornings, that's the tone for the rest of the day.
Right.
So just be aware, do some experiments in your own life of what limiting that does to how your day is. Just do some experiments and see if changing your input affects how you are.
Yes, because I want to know stuff. I want to know what's going to happen. I want to know what are the cases, what are we, blah, blah, blah. But it does me no good. It doesn't do my brain any good to know that. It's part of me trying to control situations. And maybe if I, then, which is I'm pulling it in, and that's part of anxiety and depression, really. So the whole concept of letting go and, okay, I'm going to surrender this. I choose my mental health and spiritual health for the day instead of knowing what's happening on the news or on my Twitter or on whatever. So
That's good. That's good. So knowing yourself, being honest with yourself, in addition to being honest with other people on how you're doing, but knowing yourself to know what is really good, what feeds my soul, and what doesn't is important.
And for most people, too much time on social media is damaging. It's toxic.
Yeah. So we're coming up to an hour, and I just wanted to just say, was there anything that any of you wanted to say that we haven't had an opportunity to talk about? Anything on your minds? I know for me, I'll just start with me. The Bible is filled with people who are crying out, in whether it's some of the Psalms or Lamentations, that people are just going, God, help. And even God help is a prayer. So whether you're praying some scripture or you're just saying, God help, I just feel like we need to just be honest with ourselves in front of God. He knows, like Scott was saying. And there's just it's just, I don't know. I probably watch too many television shows about crime, but that's a whole nother discussion. But when criminals admit they're relieved, when they admit their crime, that they're relieved, it gets it off of their chest. And in my own little crazy way of thinking, I feel like that's the same way when we just admit we don't know, we're broken, we're scared. I don't know, God, I need you. That's the greatest place to be. That's where he wants us, needing him. So this seems like this last year is a great place just to throw ourselves on our knees and go, help.
Honestly, and just be honest.
Yeah.
I have an offer. I have an offer to make. If there was a place, so you're doing your thing, you're in COVID, dealing with all that you're dealing with. What if there was a place where you could go meet with God, with others, and actually work on real stuff, and not just what you think you want to work on, but what God tells you to work on? That is actually what happens on Wednesday nights. So the quick background or the quick sketch of what we do, and I'm telling you this because I think if you're the average evangelical, you have not seen this before. I know I've been an evangelical for decades and I had not seen this before. The church has met once a month for a community prayer on a Wednesday night, once a month for many years. And when COVID started, we actually went to once a week. But part of the reason we went to once a week is because some things had been changing within that structure. Some of us had been exposed to some training on how to pray in groups. And I'll quote this till long after I'm dead. The guy training us, one of the first things he said was, nobody wants to come to your prayer meeting because they've been to one. It was boring, right? And we've all been to that prayer meeting. You walk in, there's some prayer requests, it's unstructured, it wanders, people pray way too long,
Right.
yada, 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 yada. There's a lot of dysfunction. It's not that hard to fix that. It's not that hard to orient ourselves in such a way that we're actually in a conversation with God, and we're hearing from God, and we're actually moving on a path. You can see over the hour we spend, we go places that none of us designed and none of us expected to go. And it's just not, again, it's not rocket science. It's not hard to do. But what the offer is, you're actually being swept along with others to particular things that nobody designed. But God uses each of the other people in the room to direct the conversation where he wants it to go. So there's some really simple things we do. We let God start the conversation, which means we start with scripture. We do have prayer requests. People do bring concerns in. We deal with those as appropriate. It's brisk, and it's really lit up. I don't know how else to describe it, but there's things going on there that I have longed to be a part of for a long time. So I invite you to come Wednesdays at 7. Y'all welcome.
Yeah, I can say that there's something very special that's happening on Wednesday nights. It's beautiful. There's a whole community feel to it. And I don't know, what that is, but when you get to that place where you're not afraid to ask for prayer on something, that's kind of where this group is. There's something beautiful about joining in prayer. There's something beautiful about being moved into requesting a prayer if you feel led. And there's something beautiful about just praying over people in their circumstances. So yeah, if I would go ahead, Scott, you were going to say something.
The one thing I would add is a big part of what's happening is not just the Holy Spirit is there, but you're there and I'm there, and we both bear gifts, right? Everybody in that room, God has given that person gifts. So now you're in a situation where people are not overbearing, they're not giving their opinion, but they showed up with their gifts, and the Holy Spirit is free to use those gifts. So if I'm struggling with stuff, I want to be in a room with 15 other people who are gifted by the Holy Spirit. Something cool could happen to me if I expose myself to that kind of resource. And that's exactly what happens. It's a heck of fun. You see it going, and it's like, wow, I like this. So
I just want to say, if you don't mind, Scott, that if you're not a person that's comfortable with praying aloud, that's okay too.
Oh yeah.
There are days when some people are silent, and other days when then all of us are talking. And I certainly remember, years ago when I was afraid to pray aloud because I didn't sound churchy enough, or I didn't have the right words, and all of those kinds of silly things. But there's something beautiful in what each of us bring to prayer, and how we pray, and what we can learn through it. And really, it's just talking to God. And so it's beautiful. It really
last thing I'll say is you do not have to perform. That's
right.
One piece of good news. The other piece of good news is structured in such a way so other people won't perform either, which can be a big part of the problem. So
That's nice.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody, did either of you, Ginny and Holly, please add some other things?
So I think we talked a couple times tonight about fear, and I just kind of wanted to bring us back to that and just say, we should pay attention when we're afraid. As Christians, we're not called to be afraid. We're not called to have a spirit of fear. And so we need to pay attention to that. Whether we're afraid of the pandemic, whether we're afraid of losing our freedom, whether we're afraid of whatever it is, we need to pay attention to that's not who God has called us to be. And so I would say that's a starting point. If you're finding that you're afraid, Just listen to that. Spend some time figuring out where that is. Spend some time in prayer. Spend some time walking. Spend some time really paying attention to where is the God in this. Because that's not who he's called us to be. He is strong. He is here. This is his world. And so we just need to pay attention when we're afraid. That should be a signal that something's off, and we just need to pay attention. So
That's good.
That same thing. I mean, don't push it down, because it's
Yeah.
almost like pushing down a beach ball
Yeah.
in a
yeah,
it's going to come up somewhere. And so pay attention to them. Our emotions can be great teachers, and they teach us about ourselves and where we need something and where we don't need something. And then we can help others when we have paid attention to those teachers.
Excellent. So I wanted to just list off a couple of takeaways that I've jotted down. I think that we've tried to provide different coping mechanisms for our group here, and I hope that there are some tools that you can use when you're feeling anxious or worried. Certainly, the first thing is being honest with yourself about where you're at and how you're doing. I think we need to remember to extend grace to ourselves and to others. I think we need to just kind of settle in that there, as we saw when we went from 2020 to 2021, nothing magical happened. This is still going on, even though it looks like, things are opening up, but we should still be looking for what God is trying to teach us through this past year, and let him change us, and don't resist, but to just seek him out in that. I wanted to just say, remember about community prayer on Wednesdays at 7. Also, if you have prayer requests, you can call the church, and or you can email the church, or you can even send a message through the app if you have our church app. If there's something going on and you are looking for referrals, you can also call for a therapist or such. You can also call the office, and there will be some referrals that I'm sure Ginny or Holly or others can provide for you. Did I miss anything, you guys? Was there anything else that we wanted to say? Okay. Well, if that's the case, then thank you guys. I hope everyone who's watching is feeling encouraged. Just know that we're trying to meet you in those places, and we want to acknowledge that some of the things that we're feeling, that you might be feeling, are things that we are, or maybe will be feeling as well. I also want to just remind you that, this is about teaching us, I think, teaching the world, perhaps, certainly teaching our church about what community means and how to lean into that. I have realized that community is not the conversation that I had, not just the conversation that I had in the lobby when we were meeting at church. Community is meeting people where they're at. It's about being honest. It's about being vulnerable. It's about loving the other. It's about all of that stuff. So I think we need to redefine community. And community does not have to mean hanging out with our friends and sharing sourdough bread recipes. It's about caring for people and letting them know that we care. So I don't want to preach, but that was just one of those things that's on my mind. And with that, Scott, if you would close us out in prayer, that would be an awesome thing.
I'd love to. Father, Son, and Spirit, thank you for assembling us tonight. Thank you for giving us each other. Thank you for giving us this conversation. I thank you for the encouragement that's come through it. I thank you for the way that you are working in each of our hearts in this time of quarantine and challenge and COVID. I just thank you for your loving kindness, for the way that this experience is going to bear fruit for us that lasts, because it's actually coming from you, and you love us that much. So watch over us, God, and make us wise. Help us to love each other. Amen.
Amen. I love that. Help us love each other. That'd be good.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you all for listening.
Thank you. Good
Thanks,
night,
guys.
Oak Hills and friends.